There is now and has been a movement nationwide. You had New York. You had Lawrence, Kansas, and you didn't have very many places in between.
When we would march, we would always say, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." I mean, that's one of our marches.
We applied for funding in space and we were denied.
It was much bigger than what we anticipated, so I wanted to change the whole thing.
And maybe when they were involved with the organization, so you could get an idea of the times that they'll be able to address most specifically. Sound okay?
Yeah. I'm David Stout. I am the founder and the first president of the Lawrence Gay Liberation Front. As the first president, I think I established the foundation for what all of these other officers who came later built upon the foundation.
Well, I came in '69 and very early got involved with David around the Gay Liberation Front and was the first faculty advisor to the Gay Liberation Front back in '70-71.
In the spring semester of 1970, after I finally came out, I was enrolled in a class which was the preparatory class for our social work practicum. And our professor assigned a term paper in a different way explaining, next semester you will be taking your practicum, which will require you to be out in the field working with real clients. Well, for my paper, I wanted the gay people to be my clientele.
And so I interviewed about 100 people for that paper in Lawrence and Kansas City and Topeka. One of those people was a Lawrence High School boy, and he was rather insistent that because I knew so many people in Kansas City and Lawrence and Topeka, that I start gay liberation. He says, it's happening all over America. You need to do something. You're the only one that knows everyone. And so he put up a bunch of posters without telling me, but he put up posters all over the campus, join gay liberation, call David Stout. And then he came over to my house and he told me what he had done. And I thought, oh my God, you didn't. And so when the calls started coming in, I just set a date and time. We met in my bedroom in June 1970, and there were 7 of us in that first meeting. So 7 of us created gay liberation in June of 1970.
At that time, we were called the GLF. I met this man, Tony Sears, in the John. He cruised me, and he picked me up. We had a little fling, and then he took me to a Gay Liberation Front meeting. Well, the first time I walked in that meeting, it was the first time I'd ever been in a room full of queer people. I didn't have to justify or explain my existence. I never experienced anything like that in my life.
The main mission, as we saw it, was education. We saw we are a part of the university. The university is about education. And we felt it was our responsibility to educate the straight community, you know, the Kansas at large, about what it meant to be gay and to stand up for gay rights.
The university would not provide us funding, so we funded our own stuff. In fact, we did pretty well. We were able to fundraise and have parties and this sort of thing. We were able to take care of ourselves.
You had to have a lot of guts to do it. because you weren't accepted. I mean, before you can be accepted, you have to be tolerated. Before you can be tolerated, you have to be granted existence.
They couldn't wear one article of clothing that was not of their sex assigned at birth, or they'd literally go to jail, and in jail they'd get raped and they'd get beaten, and they'd, I mean, it was really brutal. So the fact that they were even out and like being as brave as they were, like, wow.
I went through the experience of gay faculty who were closeted, who were terrified at being discovered or outed because it could cost them their jobs, and in fact did back in those days.
You know, when I came to KU in the fall of '68, I knew that I was gay and I knew I wanted to come out, but of course I had no information. I didn't know how to do it. It was so secretive about where the gay community was that you really had to know somebody. And I was trying my darndest to let everyone know, hey, I'm gay. You know, I came out to a whole class in 1968, just trying, but there was no one else that was gay in the class.
Most of that struggle is with yourself. And you have to accept who you are. And once you do that, and that's hard, that's very, very difficult because you're often not surrounded by anyone that is supporting you, by an environment that supports that. So that's not an easy thing to do. But once you do that, then you will find support around you.
There's really nothing other than keeping on, fight the fight. I mean, in a sense, that's the deck you were dealt. You can piss and moan about that, or you can hunker down and do what you got to do, which is to live out your life in the most productive way you can, finding those who care for you as your allies and friends.
Awesome. I started testosterone on June 7th, and it was the day my life completely changed. And it was the best day of my entire life because I remember how excited I was and so nervous for all the new possibilities because they gave you all these warnings, you know, all of like these things are gonna happen. And I was hearing them and I was like, these aren't warnings, these are like blessings, you know, like this is what I'm wanting. But I remember my mom and I were both crying when I finally did it. And I think it was just kind of like that realization of this is where life starts and this is where I can be happy.
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag because I have had a really great time meeting a lot of other queer people of color here. I didn't really get that in high school, so it's been a very unique experience and it's been just very, very nice to make friends that have similar identities to me. The sort of not great so side of that is I've just dealt with a lot of microaggressions just pretty frequently, and they're the kinds of things that when I do address them, it ends up just being such a pain that I don't really see the point in addressing them anymore. It's just like, oh, like you use they them pronouns, or like people like rolling their eyes in class when I like introduce myself with those pronouns. It's just the small things that sort of make me feel like my identity is an overreaction rather than like an actual thing I hold close to me.
Yeah. So coming to campus, like sort of like out of high school, like I had definitely already come out at like 8th grade, and so I was definitely very early in terms of like my queer experience sort of starting out. What I will say is like being on the University of Kansas campus has like really changed my perspective on like how I view myself and like others within the queer and trans community here. Like personally, I throughout high school never really found a place for like my gender identity. And sort of, you know, the perspectives coming from that is that like literally you don't have that control. I think as a teenager, you're in a unique space here as a college student, as like a quote unquote like semi-adult.
It's just great meeting other folks who are queer but also people of color, because obviously those two identities intersect in my life and make my experience different from other queer people or other like straight people of color.
You know, as queer people of color, we deserve joy, and oftentimes we are not really reminded of that, and having those spaces is so important because it helps us remember that.
I think that like definitely, like I said, being surrounded by other queer people, other people of color, and other queer people of color has definitely helped me kind of navigate through my own journey and also just through college. But in terms of hindrances, we can't ignore that we're at a predominantly white institution. We can't ignore that there's just homophobia everywhere, there's racism everywhere. So I think that's just a daily experience that we have to kind of go through, and it's obviously hinders the experience of being a human here.
So yeah, here I am now, 18 years old, where I never thought I would ever be. I started telling myself, I think when I was about 8, that I wouldn't make it to 18. And that's really hard, you know, and I think a lot of people deal with that. But I'm here, and I'm queer, and so many other people are too. And being able to advocate and be a voice for other people in my community is such an honor to be able to do. And I couldn't imagine my life any other way right now.
When I saw the center down there, that is so nice. That is so nice. They're down there sitting like they're supposed to be. This is what we wanted. They're down there in a safe space. Oh, my first reaction that when I walked into the room is the first time I did not have to justify or explain the fact that I was queer. I'd never been in a room of queer people. I realized, hey, I'm not the only one. I trust our legacy with you, because the point is, if we don't keep our own legacy alive, if we're not visible, we don't exist.
It is my hope for those of you who are watching this, that 51 years from now, there will be 5 or 6 of you, like the 5 or 6 of us, that will be here. And you will tell the next generation, 51 years ago I was in this room, and I saw and met the original people who started all of this 100 years ago.
At the time that I did this, I had no idea that we would be changing the fucking world.